Hey, this is Anthony Cesari with SuccessForYourSongs.com, and in this video, we're going to take a look at a mistake that you can avoid if you don't want your lyrics to be misheard or wordy. And we're going to look at a few examples of hit songs that do this so that you can avoid doing that yourself and make sure that your lyrics are heard the way you want them to be. Have you ever listened to a song and wondered what the singer was saying? That is definitely an issue you want to avoid when you're writing your own music. And there's definitely things you can do to prevent that. So to start, I just want to give you a quick background on stresses in words and music. This is something I've talked about in other videos, but it's definitely necessary to talk about here in context to what we're looking at in this video. So we'll go through this before I get to some examples that I want to show you. So in the spoken word, some syllables are accented and others are not. For example, if you look at the word station, which is the word that I have on the screen here, this is a word that we've heard a lot, so we're really familiar with its sonic shape. And if you listen carefully to it, you'll notice that the first syllable, the stay, that's the syllable that's stressed more than the second syllable. And if you look up any multi-syllable word in a dictionary, they'll actually show you that right here next to the word. So you can see the bolded part is the stressed part of the word. And if you want to hear it, you can just hit this play button as well.
Station.
So that tells you what that word is supposed to sound like. That stress on the first syllable helps to create its natural shape as we're used to hearing it. So if we stress the second syllable, which shouldn't be stressed, then we'd get station. So that just sounds weird, and it's not how we're used to hearing it. So what does that have to do with music? Before we move on, I just want to mention that we have a couple of free songwriting cheat sheets for you that can download in the upper right-hand side of the screen. You can just tap that little eye and grab those. Also, if you have not yet subscribed to this YouTube channel to stay updated on our latest songwriting videos, we've got a subscribe button on the lower right-hand side of the video. You can do that there. So when we sing words, we're still accenting certain syllables, but in music, the position of the syllables in the measure dictates which syllable gets accented and which syllables don't. So each measure of a song has certain beats that are stronger than other beats in the same measure. For example, in 4/4 time, the first beat of the measure is the strongest, and the third beat is the next strongest. After that, the second beat is the third strongest, and the fourth beat is the weakest. And you can even go into further breakdowns from there, but without getting too into the weeds on it, we really just need to know that the first and third beats of the measure are the strongest beats of the measure. So if we put a syllable on the first or the third beat of a measure, it's going to sound more accented than a beat that's on the second or last beat. So as songwriters, part of our job is to align the accents in our words with the accents in our music. Singing is an exaggerated form of speech, so in order for our words to resonate with our listeners and sound natural, we need the phrases we sing to have the same sonic shape as the spoken version of our words. A lot of times when we mishear what a singer's saying, it's because the accent of the word within the music doesn't align with how the word is accented when it's spoken. So we're going to look at a few examples of songs that didn't align the musical stresses with the stresses in the word to see that how that affects what we hear in the lyric, and so that this can be something that you try to avoid when you're writing your songs, because you want your lyrics to have the biggest impact possible. You're spending all that time on your lyrics. You want them to hit the music appropriately so that they're heard the way you intended them to be. And I should just say about the examples that we're going to look at, this is no disrespect to the writers and the artists. This kind of thing happens to everyone when you're writing, and it can actually be really hard to hear when you're in the throes of writing. It's something that you really have to listen for specifically. So once I make you aware of this in this video, you may catch yourself putting the stresses of a word on the wrong beat in the music, and you really want to create this habit of forcing yourself to listen to make sure that your lyrics are landing the way you want them to. Okay, so sticking with our example with the word station that we just looked at, the first example song that I want to look at here is Telephone by Lady Gaga featuring Beyonce. So when Beyonce sings the line, "Sometimes I feel like I live in Grand Central Station," that second syllable of station, the shun, that falls on the third beat of the measure. So as we just talked about, the third beat of the measure is a pretty strong stress musically. It's second only to the first beat of the measure. So if you put a syllable there, it's going to sound stressed. So it's not really where you'd want to put the unstressed syllable, the shun in station. You wouldn't want that to land on the third beat, but it does in Telephone. So take a listen to what that ends up sounding like. So did you hear how that sounded unnatural? So now you know why. That shun, that second syllable of station, was accented because it fell on that third beat. Okay, so another example of this happens in the song Hurt by 9 Inch Nails. It's also in the Johnny Cash version as well, since the melody is the same there. And in this song, we hear the word empire. Now, normally, and we can check the dictionary on this, the word empire has a stressed first syllable. So it's just like station in that way. The M of empire is stressed, and then the pyre is the unstressed section of that word. So in hurt, the word empire, the M actually falls on the second beat, and then the pyre falls on the third beat. So that second syllable, which isn't supposed to have the stress, ends up sucking up all the stress for that word, and it sounds like this. So you can hear how that's kind of unnatural there. Actually, for the longest time, I really didn't even know what he was saying there. That's what I'm talking about when I say that your lyrics can be misheard. And this is why. So far in both of these examples, we saw an unstressed syllable land on the third beat of a measure. And you might think it's not too big of a deal, but when things like that happen, it takes away from the lyric. Because when you hear that, you may ask yourself, what did she just say? Or he said that weirdly. And then while you're thinking that, the next couple of lines happen and you miss them. But if they just sounded natural, then you can, enjoy the lyric for what it is. So anyway, in those two examples, we saw what happens when you put an unstressed syllable on a stressed musical beat. But a lot of times, if you try and put a syllable that should be stressed on a less stressed musical beat, that will tend to sound rushed and you'll barely hear the word in the song. This is another way that lyrics can be misheard through being misstressed. And an example of this one happens in the song Payphone by Maroon 5. So if you listen to the phrase, all of our bridges burn down, you'll notice that the word burn is one that would normally be stressed, because in this case we have a single syllable word, but it's a verb, and usually single syllable verbs and nouns will be stressed. But in this case, that word burn, which should be stressed, lands in between the third and fourth beats, so it's just sitting right in the middle of those two beats. So it's on the four and, basically, which can be one of the weakest beats in the measure. But as a result, that word burn sounds rushed. And then the word that comes right after it, down, actually sounds prominent because it falls on the downbeat. So let's take a listen to that. It's the phrase, all of our bridges burn down. You'll hear how the burn passes by pretty quickly. One more time. So you can hear there how a word that wanted to be stressed just wasn't. So really, your phrases should sound as natural as they do in speech. And you don't necessarily have to break down your own songs as thoroughly as I'm talking about in this video, but you do want to keep an open ear when you write and listen for these situations so you can avoid them when possible. Because you want to give your listener the best chance of staying engaged with your words and avoiding situations that could create misheard and even wordy lyrics. Wordiness tends to happen when you have words that should be stressed, kind of like we saw in the Maroon 5 example, and a bunch of those end up being stuffed into unstressed places. That a lot of times can contribute to wordiness in lyrics. Some of that can also be not writing to a well-defined melodic motif, but that's a different topic for another video. So I've showed you how this plays out in a few songs here, and let's just take a look at an example of seeing a line in two different ways. So I'll show you this on a line from one of my songs. This is the title, actually. Love is up in the air. So in this phrase, when you say it, the words that want to be stressed are love, up, and air. And then is and in the are those unstressed words in between. Generally, articles and prepositions and smaller single syllable words don't get stressed, and single syllable nouns and verbs do. But even if you're unaware of that, just by saying the phrase, love is up in the air, you can hear where those stresses pop out, and it's on those three words. So, let's say I was writing the melody, and these numbers represent the beats in the measure, and I had love and in falling on the strong beats, and then air falling on a strong beat too, which are the 1 and the 3. So that might sound something like this. Love is up in the air. So you can see on this one, I had in on the third beat and it really stood out. Love is up in the air. So when you think about it that way, it just sounds unnatural because you would never say love is up in the air. It just sounds awkward. And the same thing happens when this phrase is sung that way, when that in falls on a stressed beat. So instead, so this first version up here, that's the one that I just had where in was on the 3 beat. Down here, the strong stresses in the music align with the words that should be stressed. So remember, that was love, up, and air. And those are falling on the first beat, the third beat, and the first beat again. And I should say air is actually coming in a little bit before that downbeat, but it acts as if it's falling on the downbeat because it's a long note that does hit the downbeat. It just happens to start a little bit before it as well. So this revised version of that could sound something like this. Love is up in the air. So you can hear how that sounds much more natural the way the phrase is supposed to be. And this is how that played out in the final version of the song. Love is up in the air. And if you want to hear that full song, I've got the link for that on the screen and below the video. And if I would have recorded that phrase the first way I showed you with the in on the third syllable, that would have just sounded awkward in the final version. So keep this in mind when you're writing your lyrics so that you can have words that are heard the way you intend them to be. You're spending all this time on your lyrics, so you might as well have people hear what you want them to hear. So I hope you found that information useful. If you'd like a lot more ways to improve your songwriting, I've got a couple of free cheat sheets for you that you can download by tapping on the screen here. Also, if you have not yet subscribed to this YouTube channel to stay updated on our latest songwriting videos, you can tap our logo on the screen for that. And there's also a link on this screen where you can hear the song that I played for you in this video and the song that you're hearing right now. So thank you for checking this one out. I'll talk to you in the next one.